3000.
My name's Maloney. This is the 3000 podcast. I'm joined today by an artist, Ben Aitken. Ben, thanks for coming, man.
Thank you for having me.
Man, whereabouts did you grow up? Have you been in Melbourne your whole life?
Victoria, not specifically Melbourne. I grew up in a lot of country towns. His dad was in the army, so lived on all the bases in Wagga Wagga, Puckapunyal, and then when me and my sisters sort of got older and we just sort of settled in Melbourne and grew up around Hyatt, Parkdale, Mentone, Sandringham in like the army housing there, and then
there's army housing there. Right?
yeah.
Okay.
So I guess I don't really know anything about it, but I'm assuming when you're stationed or you have to move around, like they just sort of pay for you moving, and there's affordable housing that the army owns.
Yep, and that's tough on a kid trying to find your way when you're moving around a lot,
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like it was tough, but I sort of can't really remember. But I mean, as an adult, like I look back and be like, that would have been annoying. You can't make friends and shit. But I mean, I just sort of really remember my high school years.
Yep,
mostly.
Yeah. So as a kid, you're moving around a lot, and does that gravitate you towards drawing and art because you're constantly on the move and that's a constant, or are you doing normal kid stuff?
Nah, I didn't do any drawing or anything till like year 11, basically.
Yep.
Got into graph and tagging and shit in probably year 8 in Chelt High.
Yep.
For like, a few years and a few years after high school as well, but it wasn't until year 11 I started to like get into drawing and learning about what the art world was. Yeah.
Well, by year 11 you'd moved on to the senior campus, I'm presuming there.
Oh, Chelt High was like so not Bowie or Hyatt. Chelt was like a separate school. It was like a jock school, really, like sports and shit.
Yeah.
And then, just moved to Sandy because Sandy was like, the word of the town of like, do what you want.
It was definitely I was there a few years before you, and a lot of people that I've met later in life we've figured out we went to that school, but it did tend to gravitate, a lot of artistic people gravitate towards there because there was a lot of artistic classes you could take and that sort of thing. But it also attracted a lot of people that didn't want to fucking do much as well.
Yeah.
Which one were you leaning towards?
Yeah, the latter. I mean, I had no idea about I was into music.
Yeah.
Like before I moved, like at Chelt, like I was playing music a lot. My parents had paid for me to play percussion and extracurricular lessons as well for like 10 years.
Yeah, like rock drumming type stuff?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, in the end, like in year 10 we were playing like fucking Tool songs and like polyrhythms and shit, and we knew our teacher had no fucking idea, and we just piss her off and like asking her what's a polyrhythm, and she'd be like, many Latin for many rhythms. And it's like it's two time signatures at the same time. But yeah, we were just assholes. And then we actually, like a bunch of us all went to Sandy, and all those dudes and girls, and they all went to do music. And then I just was like, oh, we'll do art because it's subjective, right? They can't fucking fail me.
Yeah.
And then just sort of started about like, what I thought would be a couple of months of fucking around, but had the right teacher and he, encouraged me.
Yeah, which is awesome. And now I'm trying to think back where the music section was. I hung out in the art section more than anything. But I can't even think about where the music spot was.
If it's the same, and I assume it would be, it was like just like the music, the art bit is like that little courtyard, yeah?
Yeah, at the top.
Yeah, so like just before it, there's like a weird sort of, Jeff Shed type thing, like a portable thing.
Yeah, and that was the music spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it'd be very soundproof in there.
No.
But the video production space and all that was pretty, when I was there at least, that was pretty fucking, like, we had some equipment, we had cameras we could use. That school was really really good for artistic kids or people that wanted, and they let you do multiple artistic, you know, kind of pursuits, which you didn't have at a lot of other schools.
Yeah, I did some music class as well, like, because I had an empty elective I had to do. I mean, at school was so lax. Like, I brought a friend in once. You know, he had a day off for some reason. He went to De La Salle, and yeah, he just came into school one day with me and came into class, and we're like, oh, like, this dude's new. And I go, what's his name? He's like, Jeremy. And I just wrote him down the roll. Like, he never came back in the whole year. Like, every fucking class, they'd be like, is Jeremy? Like, I'm like, man, who's fact checking like these kids?
I remember going there when I'd been expelled from another school with my mum. Like, oh, are they gonna let me in? Like, I've been expelled. There was no questions. They're just like, what do you want to do? Write it down here. We'll see you tomorrow.
Not even like, is this even your mother?
They didn't even care. They're just like, all right. And I remember leaving, driving away, going like, that was easy. I was nervous. I'd just been expelled from a school. Are they gonna let you in? They let fucking everyone in.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many fucking people there.
There's a lot of people there, and I'm still finding that out to this day. All right, so you're at Sandy. You're starting to do a little bit more art, less music. What's the natural progression? There was a lot of graphics at that school, a lot of writers when I was there, and I think that was a bit of a hub for that sort of stuff as well. And they weren't taking art as seriously, or they were in the art classes as well. Like, where did you sort of progress your style or your personal sort of style?
I had a good teacher who, he's not there anymore, but he wrote Sizer for CR Crew, and he was, at the time, I'd say 10, 12 years older than I was, and he just saw me fucking around, you know, not really, you know, this was Viscom, and yeah, he just sort of encouraged me to, like, you know, like, expand that. And then, like, you know, really get into, like, the live drawing and all the other classes, and then that's when I connected with that teacher, and it sort of expanded a bit. It didn't expand so much, like, you know, to where I'm at now and my interest in the art world, but my interest in art expanded. I was still, you know, post-high school, still doing fucking, you know, shitty, like, Marilyn Monroe fucking stencils and Jimi Hendrix and, like, fucking shit that I thought was cool, but, like, total pop art rubbish. And, yeah, really it was just, like... But it, you know, it started that, and then, you know, there was another moment like later in my career where, you know, I was working at an art auction house and learning about, you know, art history, Sydney Knoll and Ian Fairweather and stuff coming up in the secondary market. Another way to describe it is like a different price bracket. So, like, you know, looking at like $1,000, $2,000 canvases in like some fucking street art gallery or whatever, and then it's like, oh, fucking 50 grand, 100 grand. I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
And then that's when I really, you know, this is after high school, I started to really be like, Then I started to educate myself.
Yeah. And at that school, if you wanted to do stuff, you could. But if you wanted to go the other way, you could as well. Yeah. But there was a lot of, when I was there a bit earlier, there was a lot of people that would go to school, they'd do fuck all, and then they would go probably smoke bongs or do whatever they wanted to do. There was just like a bit of a meeting point. So you had to...
The alleyway.
Yeah, well, you had to want to... excuse me. You had to want to sort of learn. So I guess at this stage you're choosing to learn. You're choosing to apply yourself.
Yeah, not like entirely, but yeah, for the most part. I mean, I could have applied myself more. I don't know if it was like a conscious decision of like choosing to like learn. It was more of a thing that was just like passionate about something. I was interested, you know, like lunch break and shit and recess or whatever. Like I'd be in the art rooms and like.
Which is definitely, well then you're choosing to learn. Like there was definitely, you could be that there at school and go, fuck this, I'm going. And you could just walk out. They wouldn't care. Yeah. And if you're in the classroom at lunchtime, then you do care. Like you're interested in art.
I guess it just wasn't conscious to me at the time. Yeah. I was just sort of like obsessive about it.
And so then where do you progress your art from there at school? Like after year 11, year 12, you look at finishing school. I'm guessing you're in the arts program for when you finish, and then you apply for VCA, or what's the next step for someone who wants to focus on art?
It's funny you say VCA because I guess it's the encouraged trajectory, which I did. I applied for VCA and got in, and then decided I was probably nervous, I guess, maybe.
So how everyone who might know of VCA, Victorian College of the Arts, it's hard to get into. So how many like students are they accepting? You know what I mean?
I don't know.
But it's not. Sure. But it's not. It's not like you're not just applying and getting in. Like it's hard to get in.
I mean, it's the hardest one out of all of them. But I think now it's probably easier now.
Mm-hmm.
I think back then it was a bit harder, but yeah, it seemed daunting. I don't know. I'm glad that I didn't go.
So you didn't go at all? Didn't put any time in there?
No.
Didn't accept the invitation?
No.
Didn't go to orientation day?
Oh, I went. No.
Ah, there you go.
No, just the interview.
There you go.
Yeah.
And you got that's kind of cool in itself that you sort of did your own thing without having to go through that route.
Yeah. I mean, like, I look back on it now, I'm just like, it's hard to really know what I was thinking as like a 19-year-old or 18-year-old.
Mm.
I look back at it now, I'm like, why'd you choose to not go in and just work in a factory?
But your art peers at the time that you're doing art with must have been like, fuck, man, you got in. Go, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, a hazy memory, but yeah.
So you're working in a factory then, so what else are you doing? I'm guessing, I'm sort of concluding that maybe drugs are becoming a thing?
Yeah, I mean, drugs were a thing in year 11 and 12. Like, we're all doing heroin already at that point.
At school, well, not at school, but in school years.
Yeah.
In year 11.
Yeah.
Fuck, man. People were smoking bongs in my day. I don't know if anyone was shooting up at school.
Yeah, look, it was pretty, it wasn't like a talked about thing. Like, it wasn't like popular. But there was like a group of us, maybe like 7 of us.
Really?
And, yeah, it became a thing. We'd just fucking get on it and go 10-pin bowling at Moorabbin or go to the movies. And it started with oxys and shit in year 11 and then, like, you know how it goes.
Yeah.
So that's probably why some of my answers around some of these events are sort of cloudy too. Like, I'm just like...
Fuck, yeah, it's a hazy time.
Like, I don't really remember certain decision making. But, yeah, then after high school, you know, just working full time for the first time as like a 18, 19-year-old, you know, $700 a week sort of thing. I'm like, you know, money. And then that exacerbated like drug use. Rented a factory next to where I worked. I timed it. It was like 25 seconds. It's like the next driveway. So I hired this factory. It was like a storage facility, but I set it up as like a studio and like put like a bed and shit and shower and stuff. And so I'd be at work within 20 seconds and home within 20 seconds. And I'd just get on it and just do some paintings and stuff.
Right. So
I was able to manage it quite well for a while.
So you're, like, for lack of a better word, you're a functioning user. You're using your... And look, I've never done heroin, so I don't know what it's like, but I would always see, you know, people nodding off and that sort of thing, and I'm guessing that's what happens initially, and then after that you can kind of function a little bit more and you're in a place of, like, a zen place. Is that how it goes?
Sort of, I guess. I mean, it's probably like any drug, you just sort of get used to it, or your body gets used to it, and you probably, you know, you're still feeling a high, but you're probably more used to, like, being capable of social situations and talking to people and hiding it more.
So, yeah, because you're functioning, you've got your job, you don't want anyone that you work with to know that you're doing that, so you just wait.
Oh, they knew. Don't get me wrong, but, you know, there was the days where I was fucking totally... I had no idea what was going on.
So you're using before work?
Sometimes, like, yeah, well, a lot of Xannies and shit.
Okay.
That was a big thing around then. And just, yeah, doing a job that's not the way you're meant to do it. Like a job that I've done 100 times. And then, you know, your boss comes up and just taps you on the shoulder like, I think you should go home.
Yeah.
It was a sort of weird work environment too. Like, I never talked about it. Like, you never got in trouble. It was sort of like the same as Sandy, but you get paid for it.
Yeah, right. So,
and everyone from Sandy went to that fucking job too.
Well, yeah, they probably knew what they were in for, the people that were hiring. They're like, these kids, yeah.
And then word of mouth, everyone's like, I fucking get a job at this place. Like, they don't give a shit.
Yeah. So eventually you move on from there, though. And then where are you are you doing more art? Where are you going from there?
Oh, where I went from that job, that was, next step was rehab. From there.
So you were that deep in at that stage?
Yeah.
In your early 20s?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you just hit a point where you're like, okay, this isn't healthy, this isn't normal, it's not the life I want, take myself to rehab.
Yeah, like it was that sort of conscious. Unlike, fucking up something drastically or, getting in trouble or like ODing or whatever. I was like...
And ODing is a possibility at this point in time. Like, people are ODing.
Yeah. I was just like, I don't know, this weird like sort of moment where I was just, at work doing something and I was like, just like a big sigh like inside my head. And I was just like, this is enough sort of thing. And I just messaged my mum, told her what was going on. I mean, she knew. And then she just picked me up and I just went upstairs and said, I'm leaving. And she just took me to a doctor and got some, stuff written out and then just went to a rehab.
Would it, if your mum knew and if she tried to push you to do that, would you have had the same reaction, do you think?
No.
You had to come to that realisation. And obviously, as a parent, she must be doing her own head in thinking my son's doing this if she's privy to that sort of information. So that must have been a tough time for her as well.
Yeah. And I think like the selfish thing that I didn't realise, and obviously we'll talk about the later events in my life as well, but for both of these things were like, I just thought about myself basically. I mean, I was quite selfish in not thinking, how does this affect anybody else? Because I was just in my own fucking vortex of like, addiction. Like, it was only like, many, many, many years later, like, she was like, she told me that it was really traumatic, like, when I went to rehab and her and my dad had to go through the studio that I had and like pack everything up and clean the shit out for the real estate agent, and there was fucking needles everywhere. And for them to like fucking go through that was like really hectic. And it was something I never thought about. But like the way she told me, I was just like, it was so profound. I'm like, fuck, like...
It's confronting for them because they knew, but then they were physically, visibly seeing it.
Yeah. So then I was like, yeah, maybe... I wish I learned that lesson then, to think about the people around me. Unfortunately, I didn't learn it.
But you're young, though, man, and I think people make mistakes like that later in life that have the beauty of hindsight and learning things. So you're young, so and young people don't generally consider how much their parents go through in traumatic times. You know what I mean? Because they just take their parents for granted.
Yeah, pretty much.
So then you take yourself to rehab. Is it one of your stock standard kind of rehab things? And obviously, luckily for you, you've got a family who have got your back. So that's an option for you.
Yeah, it wasn't a stock standard. Well, sort of a stock standard rehab, really. I mean, it was a Christian sort of vibe and real, like, yeah.
Most of them, not most, but a lot of them are.
Yeah, I mean, 12 Steps is based on like a higher power.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got a lot of rehabs that are, I mean, you got more rehabs that are religious than secular.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't the best experience because, I grew up a Christian, going to church with mum and shit, and so I fucking loathed it. But, I had taken myself there and wanted to, like, sort of, prove myself, and so I stayed for quite a while. I think I was there for 5 months.
That's a long time, man.
And then...
Some rehabs are, like, only for, like, 30 days, 60 days?
Yeah, I think it's more like a detox. Or if they call it a rehab, I don't know, it takes so long for the brain to, like, rebalance, like, chemically,
And are you in there with other heroin users? Are you in there with alcoholics? Are you in there with people with different substances?
It was mostly people on ice. There was maybe, like, 3 or 4 out of, like, 20 dudes for heroin. One dude for, like, gambling. And one dude for, like, who was addicted to, I shouldn't laugh, Panadol. And he was a bit kooky. Yeah. But I feel like these places, like, it's almost like a pyramid scheme. Like, they get these people in, they get on Centrelink, mental health benefit, and you pay to stay there, and then, like, you finish this program, and you become, like a leader or a counsellor or whatever, and it becomes this revolving door of, like, either people who've got nowhere to fucking go, and they become a part of the team, or just, like, it's like your jail, like, get a jail free card, like, people just get bailed to a place like this.
Yeah, it's where I used to live. There was a lot of sort of rehab and halfway houses and that sort of thing. And you see those people, and you kind of think like it's good that they've got somewhere to go, but where do they go after that? Do you know what I mean? Like for someone like yourself, you've got a family, like you've got somewhere to go. A lot of these people don't have that option. You know what I mean? They might do this and they've got the care around them. Then they're back out on their ass, and then what happens? You know?
Mm. Yeah, it's a big thing that I've thought about the last few years. Like, some people just have the odds stacked against them.
Totally.
Like, you know, circumstantial or whatever it might be. Like, they don't have, you know, good family, they don't have good friends, they don't have good, like, peer support. Like, they've just had it shit from, like, the get-go.
Sometimes I'll see people on the street with their kids, they're yelling at their kids doing the wrong thing. And I think that kid doesn't have a chance, man. Like that parent is like doing it like not the wrong way, but the parent might have an issue, but then you think, well, their parent might have had an issue, and that's like a cyclical issue that's going on. Do you know what I mean? That never kind of changes, and that's where the crux of the problem is. That we need to break those cycles. You know?
Yeah. Need more. I mean, at least pertaining to drugs, more awareness programs and people talking about drugs, really, to destigmatize it. You know, like, if you have an addiction problem and most people feel uncomfortable talking about it because it's not really talked about.
Well, yeah, so it is and it isn't. So people will happily talk about coke, bags, getting on the rack, all that stuff. Will they talk about recreationally using heroin? Probably not.
No.
Some people in certain groups will talk about using ice recreationally. Other people, you definitely don't talk about that. So drugs is a broad spectrum, and the stigmas lie differently within that, if that makes sense. And like, even just you saying that when you're in there with a lot of ice guys, did they look at you differently? Did you look at them differently? Was there factions between that sort of stuff?
Nah, I don't think so.
You're just all addicts and we're all there for the same reason.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's interesting because culturally we seem to think of ice as a bigger issue than heroin now. You know, 20, 30 years ago, methamphetamine wasn't really much of a thing, you know. It was around, it definitely wasn't as prevalent. We thought of heroin as the issue, and culturally I think that's changed in Melbourne, and I think a lot of the places around the world. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. It's a tricky one because, like, you know, heroin's something that really is like there's a tangible thing about heroin that is taking lives. Like, you see someone fucking die. With ice, you know, ODs are much rarer. You know, if they really, you know, happen very much at all, they do, but it's much rarer.
But what they do is get themselves so off their heads that they'll take a car and
that's
crash it and do that.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but yeah.
You got people jacking fucking cars and fucking, you know, doing all sorts of crazy shit. You know, most people who fucking, you know, get on the nod, they just want to fucking play Xbox or sit on the couch and have a pie. Mm-hmm. So, like, I can see, yeah, like, it's a tricky one, but I guess at the end of the day, like, the more we talk about all drugs, and, like, when you say drugs, like, consider all of them, you know, like, you throw G in there, and, like, so, that's one of the most socially unacceptable drugs today, but still quite socially acceptable in quite a lot of scenes.
Yeah.
You know, it just needs to be, I mean, like, you look at Coke, and it's like $300 for a shit bag, $400, $450 for a good bag, and people talk about fucking rack all the time, and it's like, it's socially acceptable, but it's like, well, it's also talked about by those who can afford it. You know, you don't hear people who can only fucking get, you know, a couple of points or something for a week and just get on it and, like, do stupid shit or do crime to get the money. You didn't hear them talking about buying Coke either. So, like, there's definitely a capitalism social thing, like, aspect to it as well.
Yeah, the haves and the have-nots a little bit.
I don't know many rich people who fucking get on heroin, but if they did, they probably wouldn't talk about
No,
it.
they probably wouldn't talk about
Or
it.
they're famous musicians or us.
Yeah, that artists and famous musicians, but that is, I think, where potentially the stigma comes from because of the intravenous nature. That is potentially what makes people think about it differently, like the using of needles. And we were sort of conditioned to be told that, like as a kid growing up around St Kilda, you'd see discarded needles and you're told stay away from that, obviously. But it had such a negative stigma towards it, which I think still is strong today, and that's what people think. That's different. And some people might even think that ice is better because you're not shooting it up. Some people do, but most likely you're not. So that stigma might come from the hypodermic sort of situation. Do you think that's potentially the case?
Yeah. There's still a lot of cunts shoot up ice, though.
I know, and they must go. There was that. Remember that doco years ago? It was one of the first things I watched on YouTube, and had to watch it in so many parts. That dude in Sydney, and he was shooting up ice, and that was hectic, man.
Yeah.
And that was 20-something years ago, when ice wasn't even a huge deal, and now it's prevalent. I'm sure it's happening a lot now.
Yeah, I mean, like, when I was 20... Yeah, 20... Like, I had to go and get heroin from the flats, and, you know, those dudes were shooting up ice then. Like, you know, I ended up doing it once as well. I was like, fuck, this is, you know. I think once you get into IV shit too, and you're young and stupid, like, you just, well, at least I did. I was like, I'll just shoot up anything. Fucking shot up Gatorade. See what it would do.
Did you? It replenished your electrolytes?
Look, I didn't feel anything, but I'm sure it wasn't great for my skin.
Yeah. But if you're shooting up ice, you're definitely staying up for days. Like that's going right into your bloodstream, and you don't, even if you have a tiny little line of that, you could stay up for days. So people that are doing that, they must be really.
Yeah, they don't look good.
No. It must take years off people's lives too. Like we're kind of, I think we're made to sleep for 8-ish hours a day. If you skip a few of those, it's got to take some years off your life.
If I have a big weekend, like even now, like it's rare, but if I have a big weekend, it's like you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, I don't look normal.
I've aged.
You know?
Yeah.
When you're doing it every day, you don't even think about it. But it's definitely something I'd like to stay away from.
Yeah, and I'm sure we went on a bit of a drug tangent, which is cool, but then we'll go back to your personal journey. So you're in rehab for 6-ish months, and you get out. You're supposed to be there for 12, you were saying? So you get out, 6 months later, you've been clean for 6 months. I guess you're away from everyone. You're talking to other people who have other substance addictions, but you're out of there, so you get out, and then where do you find yourself? And you're in your early 20s still, so you've done this early.
What did I do? I got a job at an art store in Hampton. I was working there. They knew my story, and they gave me a go. And was just living with a friend and his mum. And I just, I stayed off drugs for about 5 years, 6 years.
Yep.
I drank heavily.
Yeah. What kind of booze are we talking?
At the time, I was drinking a lot of cider.
Okay.
I stopped drinking that a few years ago because
too much sugar.
Weight issues, man.
Yeah.
Like,
too much sugar.
But back then, I was skinny as, just drink whatever. But yeah, I stayed away from drugs, and I had a long-term relationship. My partner wasn't like heavily involved in that shit. She had a business, and she'd have her nights, with her friends on the coke at a club or some K or something, like nothing.
Because it was normalised.
Yeah, nothing crazy, like whatever. And that wasn't my scene. Like I just didn't like clubs and shit, so I just fucking chill at home. And so it was never really an issue. It really took probably just that breakup, and I just couldn't handle it. So I was just like, that's when I took Xannies again for the first time, probably 6 years, and just fucking totally like memory loss. Fucking
launched back into it.
Can't remember anything.
So the breakup was a catalyst for you to get back in, or that was just a bookmark in your life, you think?
I think it was probably a catalyst. And I sort of got good again, or good enough to be functional, and then
and you're still doing your own art as well.
Yeah, like painting full time, and just had my own schedule basically, and then after that, another relationship, and things are alright for quite a while, and I'm still using here and there, but relatively under control.
Can you do, like, as someone who doesn't understand that sort of drug use, can you just recreationally use heroin here and there? Is that a thing? Or
I think you can, but I think it's rare.
Alright, we'll be back to the guests in a moment. But if you could, just hit that subscribe button. I need everyone to fucking subscribe. We're not asking for any money. It's not hard. It only takes a second. Hit the subscribe button and help us out. Cheers. Because it gets in your system and you need it. You get the withdrawals and etc.
Yeah, I think it's rare, like, but it's possible.
Yep.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to encourage anyone to fucking use it.
No.
I wouldn't want to either stigmatize it by encouraging anyone not to use it. It's a complex drug, and it really depends on where you're at in life, really.
Do you think that there's a reason why a lot of musicians and artists and people are drawn to that? Do you think it has parallels with the artistic side of the brain, maybe, or anything like that?
I reckon because it is, like, stigmatized.
It makes it cooler.
Yeah, it's like a fucking little club.
Yeah.
Like, kind of this feeling that I've accessed that no one else has felt.
Yeah.
Or very few people have felt, you know what I mean? Like, you're in society and, like, shooting up is a fucking pretty wild thing to do, I guess. Like, but that on top of mental health issues, being creative and having the money and, like, the access to, like, just sort of do it, and, like, I mean, and you look at, like, people, like, in the past, like, people you look up to, like, so many musicians and artists and stuff that have died from, like, heroin and used it, like, in their practices. You sort of, like, look at that shit and you're like, it seems idolized in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's romanticized to an extent until they die, and then you're like, do I want to die at 27? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess then it's memorialized in a way, because, like, no one really talks about the OD. They just talk about the life of the person and the art. So it sort of, like, heightens, like, how amazing that person was and, like, all the good things they did. But then there's no conversation about, like, the drug use, like, in depth.
No. Have you seen that show, The Hours Before, whatever? And it goes 48 hours before certain celebrities have died, and they do, like, Jim Morrison and, all those sort of people. And it is interesting because you see what concoction of drugs these celebrities that are immortalized, whether they're in the 27 Club or whatever, what they were doing in those sort of, 2 days before they die. And that's a cool sort of look at what is going on, because they're not just on a high, and pardon the pun, they're not just, like, at the peak of their career and then just all of a sudden do drugs once and they're dead. It's a concoction and a downward spiral that takes them to that place.
Yeah. I think there's a problem with the media too. They focus on, this person OD'd on fucking this, and they don't talk about the fact that there's probably 7 other drugs in their system, like, over the course of how long.
Yeah. And how many, does the toxology report doesn't tell them when they went to sleep last.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they could be fucking having a 3-day bender, and this is happening and that's happening, they're not sleeping and haven't eaten, and there's a lot of things that it could be factors if you're partying like that. So you're back recreationally using, you're painting. Are you seeing some success, some acclaim from your artwork now?
Yeah, probably at this point, like, I'm doing relatively well. I think the period of, like, a little bit before that breakup and, like, into the next phase of my life, I was sort of hitting a bit of a stride.
And what does that mean from people that aren't in the art world? Like, obviously there's no end game, but you want to just do art full time. That's the plan? Is that what artists want to do? They just want to do art and not have to work a job and just express themselves through their art. Is that the plan?
I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I think everyone would like to not work. Like,
that's the dream.
Whether it was fucking art or not. Like, but, I mean, for me, it was ideal just to sort of make work and just chill.
Yep. And put on solo exhibitions, or you're doing group exhibitions. Like, how are you exhibiting this stuff? How are you making a name for yourself in this art scene, which is a crazy place in itself?
I mean, a lot of it really for me was just networking, like emailing people and talking to people that probably didn't really receive emails or like a shout out to be like, hey, want to meet up for a coffee sort of thing.
Yeah.
Finding that avenue to like sort of get into being involved in events or group shows, and then get your your representation and have solo shows, and eventually like I guess I got to a point where I'd have maybe one solo show a year and like sell 3 or 4 works beyond that to different collectors, and then I could just do nothing.
And that was enough to keep you going.
Yeah.
So we're talking that you're selling them for tens of thousands type scenario.
Well, around then, like late 20s, maybe like 6 to 10, and then.
And the studio or the gallery's taking their cut on that.
Yeah.
So, but you're still making some good coin.
Yeah.
And I guess it's like anything.
Like at least a minimum wage job.
Yeah, and the perpetual motion of that, I guess, and I don't really understand too much how the fine art world works, but once certain collectors are buying you, does that then give you the stamp of approval that other people are going, well, if such and such has bought it, then we're on this trend too?
Yeah, it depends who, but yeah.
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 I could imagine that, like, once you get that validation, and then you get hung at this person's house, and their rich friends come over and go, check this one out, and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of had that happen to me, like someone who's actually turned to be a really great friend. He went to a collector's house, and they had one of my works that they just bought. And he was like, what's that? Like, really like it. And they were like, oh, you can borrow it. And they, this family has like 700 artworks, like really big collectors in Australia. So this family borrowed this work, and I had it for years. I never knew where it was. I knew that it wasn't at that house, though. And they ended up buying one of my works maybe 5 years later. And they told me that they had that work, and they ended up buying like 3 more, like over the few years, and we become really close. So it definitely happens.
Yeah. And that's, I guess, I've heard about this happen for certain wealthy families or wealthy individuals that share art with each other, because I guess they get sick of looking at the same shit all the time, or they want to show their friends this stuff that they like a lot, and they there's a bit of a revolving door where people just share artworks with each other.
They have like collecting groups, like people, 10 people who've got money will all jump in. They might put 10K in each to buy a certain work, and then like they make a contract for it, I guess, and it gets shared around. One family will have it for a year, then it goes to the other place for a year. There might be a bunch of artworks in that revolving thing to go around, and then like they have like a contract for 5 years or 10 years, and at that point they put it in the secondary market for auction, and make their money back, or fucking lose, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's a gamble.
Or they donate it. If they're a decent fucking collector, they'll just donate it.
Right. Well, that's cool. Then they've got to experience it, enjoy it. For multiple people have got to show their friends, and then they donate it. That's cool. You'd like to hope that happens a fair bit. I couldn't imagine it happens a lot.
I mean, a lot of people donate shit. You also, if you donate like work to an institution, you get a like a tax kickback.
There you go. Yeah.
I think it was from 1991. The government made like a cultural gifts program. So
it's all stacking up now.
So you donate, you get a good kickback on your tax.
Not just good karma.
Yeah. And then you get your name on the wall.
Oh, the plaque.
Little like donated by.
Then you can tell your friends, oh, you're going to that museum. Well, don't forget to see my name's on there.
Yeah.
Fucking wankers. Anyway, no, that's not me. I'm not gonna. All right. So you're starting to sell your paintings for good money. You're starting to you're a full-time artist now. You're not working in the factory, you're not working in an art shop, you're a full-time, full-fledged artist. And then what happens next? Where's your next step?
COVID?
Right, which is a big fucking thing for everybody, especially in Melbourne.
Yeah, COVID, and then I sort of dealt drugs like on and off, like throughout this period of our conversation. Not only just to sort of get more drugs or get by, but I always still had sort of the wrong people sort of around me. Yeah. And COVID just sort of I don't even know what it would have been Xannies for sure. That made me be like, start doing drugs, and then just.
Are these to people within the art scene or just peers and just friends and stuff?
It started as like just people I knew, I guess, but it ended up being quite an art scene thing. But I guess it was sort of it wasn't really talked about. I don't know, at least not to my face.
No. No one's. It's just me and you having a chat.
But it was definitely like, like heaps of artists and shit. It was fucking weird. Just wicker, artists that you really like their work and shit, and so they're not contacting you because they like your shit, or like
because you're the connect.
They're just like, oh, like this artist said that you fucking got this. So, but that was it. Like I didn't give a fuck.
But that's networking too.
I was just applying something, and it was no judgment. For me, it was like, oh, cool, met this fucking person, but yeah.
And a lot of artists are dabbling because they're into that. They're free thinking type stuff. So I know that you've been involved in some Archibald Prize entries. When is this happening at that sort of COVID time as well?
Yeah.
And how does that come about? Like, obviously, that's probably one of Australia's most prestigious, if not the most prestigious, art award, if I'm not mistaken.
Sort of.
Well, you don't believe so?
It depends who you talk to.
Well,
I mean,
if you ask Joe Blow, who's not into the art scene, they would say that because it is, and because it's portraits, it's also highlighting somebody. So yeah, that's my naive non-artist guy.
Generally speaking, yeah.
Okay.
So I think the first one was 2016, and then No Dice with 2017. Then 2018, 19, and 2020, and 21. So Kobe was in that.
Yeah. And so are you approaching people that you want to paint?
Yeah. So I only painted all my portraits of other painters.
Yeah. That's a cool angle.
And then
Is that an angle that you came up with, or someone else has sort of done something similar?
Not as consistently, I don't think.
Okay.
But yeah, I just sort of. It's because I was, I was familiar with these people.
It's people you looked up to and admired.
I just didn't really like. I've definitely approached other people who weren't painters to do their portrait, but at this time I was just like, it seemed weird to me, or like looking at other artists, painting like politicians and these celebrities and stuff that they really have no connection with, but it was just to get their name out in front of the board of trustees to be a finalist.
The politicians is a weird one because I think that's so far removed from art personally.
It's getting phased out.
Yeah.
You'd be hard pressed to be a finalist with a painting of an old white dude now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. The artist thing was just like, I think after 2 times I was like, oh fuck, wrong with this.
Yeah.
And that's all I did. Bar one self-portrait, but it was still an artist, so just sort of kept it at that. So
obviously there's a lot of people that are entering this sort of competition, and then to become a finalist, like how many finalists are there?
It's around 30. It depends. It's not a specific number. It depends on how they judge it, but it's between like 30 and 40 roughly.
And to be consistently picked as a finalist is an accolade in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah? No?
Yeah.
You don't think so?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know the board of trustees, but that's who judges it. I mean, they just might like your fucking work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's personal taste. As soon as that board changes, which is every 4 years, there's like a new term. I haven't entered last year or the year before, but if I was to enter next year, it wouldn't be the same people.
But the thing is, that is definitely in that fine art scene, it's putting your name out there when you're consistently there year after year.
Mm.
So that's definitely got to help you with your own personal endeavours as an artist.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful.
Hugely.
It's a good, it's definitely a calling card, like sometimes, like when when I try not to use it, but if people don't know shit about art, like, if you're trying to, like, it's like, oh, what do you do for work? Like, I'm a painter. Oh, like house painting? I'm just like, oh, paint pictures. Like, oh, yeah. And to say, like, oh, Archibald is like, yeah, like you said before, Joe Blow, it's like all of a sudden I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I get it.
Well, yeah, it validates you instantly, I guess, for people that don't understand that scene. They go, I've heard of that. Yeah, it makes sense. All right, so that you're entering stuff there, you're making some waves in the art scene. I guess you're meeting people that you're looking up to. You're finding out how the industry works. And as someone who doesn't know that industry very well, I'm guessing it's a pretty fucking fickle and kind of strange place, especially for someone in their late 20s, or even, are you even 30? This late 20s, early 30s. It's a weird spot for a kid who potentially, wants to take Xannies and not be there.
Yeah, I guess so. But I would, again, like, I just wasn't really conscious about it. I was conscious enough to make certain, decisions, like, I want to do this, I want to do that, I'm going to paint this and paint that. And I was relatively strategic in what I did, but I think ultimately I didn't really give a fuck in the end about what people thought.
And did that work in your favour?
I think so.
Yeah, see, well, that's good, because it feels real and natural. Like, imagine the people that are knocking down the door of all these people saying, look at this, look at what I'm doing. And you're rolling, you're like, yeah, well, whatever. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. That's got a cool artistic quality about it, which I think would work in your favour.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, definitely now I'm just like doing my thing. I'm like, fuck, whatever.
Whatever, see what happens.
I feel like I'm really not even a part of the art world anymore. I'm just doing my own thing.
Which, as an artist, is a thing in itself, Like, that is... There's nothing more artistic about not giving a fuck and just doing your own thing. So, at what point does this sort of crazy stuff that you're involved with the selling drugs, with the consuming them, and the art kind of come to a head? Like, at some stage, you've got to be like, all right, I'm in pretty deep here, or fucking things are... you feel like you've got to go back to rehab, or, is something changing?
Not really. Like, I was pretty... At this point, I'd broken up with that partner, and I'm by myself in the city, and I guess got real deep into everything, and just had no filter on how I operated doing drugs, and was not careful. I was really sloppy.
Was that like a self-sabotage type thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then, it's, drugs got knocks on your door, and see you later.
And you brought it on yourself a little bit by just not being as savvy as you should have been.
Yeah. I mean, I had conversations with friends being like, oh, I'm sort of interested in prison, like, interested to see what the culture is like. Like, I wouldn't mind going for a little bit just to see. And then, like, 2 weeks later, like, that happened, and I remember thinking about that, like, in prison, being like, fucking, that's really nuts that you were, like speaking it out.
It's like The Secret. You visualized it, and then it happened. Is there, like, a sense of relief? Not relief. Is there a sense of, like, what do you think? Like, if you were blatant, you would feel like it was going to happen sooner or later. Like,
I don't think I felt anything
because you were that fucked.
I was just like, it was too surreal.
Yep.
I was just like, I mean, I guess I was like, well, this is happening, but I don't think that really. It was a lot. I was just sort of like, I think I just accepted it really quickly. I was just like, cool. I just sat there.
And that's it. And then the next step, I guess, is it's prison. Obviously with some legal stuff, but then you end up in maximum security, which must be daunting for someone without a criminal history. It's not like you've been in and out of juvie or anything like that. Straight into the maximum. Was that a daunting process?
Yeah. Yeah, it sucked. I do look back on that time, though, and I think there's some shit that I enjoyed about it, and, like, people I met that I really enjoyed speaking to, who I'm still in touch with, but yeah, the first week I was like, I was fucking scared. I was like, fuck this.
and you're an artist, and the other inmates know that you're an artist, they know that you're not really a criminal, that you're an artist. Is that a stigma?
Nah.
Is that no?
No, no one really knew. A couple of people knew because I'm talking about Sandy. There was one dude at Sandy who was there, and yeah, so like we got along, and so he knew, but yeah, didn't really go around like all the newspaper articles and shit hadn't come out yet.
Right.
So it wasn't until I got bail anyway that's when the newspaper articles came out.
So yeah, and that's when they kind of not throw you under the bus, but they really, what's the word? They sensationalize the scenario.
Yeah, big time.
And that is obviously detrimental to your career, detrimental to your personal self, and your personal health, your mental health. Sorry, I should say.
Yeah, I think at this point I didn't really give a fuck about my career. I was more, at least after prison, I was more concerned about my mental health.
Yep.
Like how it impacted me personally. It started to become more apparent, and that became my focus.
As someone who's never been to prison, is there a focus on mental health in there? Because obviously a lot of people are pretty depressed when you're behind bars all the time.
No.
There's none of that. So if people are extremely depressed, but it only would become an issue if they get to suicidal or something like that.
Yeah, pretty much. There's nothing.
There's no access to psychologists or anything like that?
Not that I was aware of. Not that I was shown.
That's really shit, because you've got people probably in the down, like the biggest down part of their life, and they don't have, and there's such a big push for mental health, and there should be like that's really, really fucked.
And if there is, they don't tell you, like.
Or there'd be a stigma with the other inmates that this guy's going to talk about.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
When I went to the assessment prison before Port Phillip, there, just filling out like a sheet, like with your parents' phone numbers and addresses, and like you got to put their birth dates. And I was like, I don't know their fucking mobile off by heart. I don't know their fucking birth date. So you fill out as best you can, and you don't hear anything, and you're stuck in here for like 2 weeks of COVID. So it's 336 hours in the same fucking cell. Like you're just going nuts. 3 days you haven't talked to anyone, so you fucking ask about the form, and it's like, we can't find it. It must have been put in the bin by accident. And I just give you another one, and it's just like, there's so many things like even in that situation, like legally I was meant to have a 1 hour run out every day, so I was meant to be let out for an hour just by myself to be in the yard and to get some fresh air. I didn't even know that, so I just stayed in my fucking cell the whole time. And it's just like, when you look back, like you're asking about mental health services, it's just like, was there? Like I don't even know, because they don't tell you.
Yeah. And I guess if you're going to seek that out, you want to go talk to somebody, then other inmates might be like, well, this person's talking too much.
Yeah, you don't really want to, you don't really want to be talking to the screws.
Asking for anything too much, yeah.
Yeah, you ask for the pool cue. That's it.
I've heard about the TV remote as well. You need to go and ask for the TV remote.
Well, I don't know. In Max, everyone had a remote like for their own cell.
Yep.
If you lose it,
that's it.
You can get another one. I don't know what the process is, but
where are you going to lose it? You're not going on an excursion.
Oh, lose it.
Lose it.
Some country doesn't have one.
Finalist pinches your remote. Is there any opportunity or avenues for artistic endeavours there, or you just like? Is it one of those sort of, movie style scenarios that if you wanted to paint or draw, you've got to access whatever you can to sort of scratch something on a piece of paper?
I mean, there's artistic opportunities or endeavours anywhere, really. Whether it's physical or in your mind, but you could draw. You could get paper and a pen. They had like an indigenous guy who like sort of headed up, like a bunch of like the Curie dudes, and like they would get like some paints and do some painting and stuff.
Yeah.
But that's what it was sort of limited to. Technically, you could probably get some paint from them if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's not really much you can do apart from just drawing with a pen.
You can go to the library, get a book, that sort of shit.
The library's pretty shit.
Yeah.
Like, there was no art books. Yeah.
You're just watching shit, commercial TV all the time.
It's pretty much what... Yeah, it's pretty much...
Which is torturous in itself.
Watching fucking...
And you're locked in a...
I never watched TV either, like... So I was just, watching daytime TV, and I'm just like, fuck, this sucks.
Yeah, man.
This time goes so slow. And then you get into shit. Like, you get into Friends, or like, Frasier, and then, then you, pinch yourself every now and then, you're like, what's wrong with you?
Your cellmate's like, don't turn that off, Frasier's. It's a Frasier marathon.
Yeah. Then we cunts arguing about, we want to watch Big Bang Theory, or fucking, I want to watch fucking, I want to watch this. I'm like, oh, man.
Well, it's better than them fighting with each other, I guess.
Yeah, well...
Imagine that. They're like, what happened with you and your cellmate? I wanted to watch Big Bang Theory. He wanted to watch Frasier, and we had ended up having a punch on.
Yeah, it's pretty much what happens.
So after your time in prison, and I guess to an extent, does it work to the point that everyone's different, that you reflect and that you think, I don't want to be in this position again? Does it actually work like that, or did it work like that for you?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that obviously I don't want to fucking go to prison again.
Yeah.
I don't want to be there. I don't want to. I don't want to go back.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's a few people said to me sort of after prison, they're like, don't waste your life with that shit. Don't get involved in the wrong thing and end up back there. You can do better things out here. And I was sort of like, well, I can do better things anywhere. I can make an impact anywhere. So hypothetically, if I went back to prison, I'd have a different mindset. But not like a fucking missionary or some shit. But I'd make the best of it. So I wouldn't...
You're going with a different mindset than the first time, and you'd be more prepared mentally, and I guess...
I'd be, hella prepared mentally. I wouldn't be worried. But yeah, I'd just make the most of, learning more about, the people I talk to and about the system and shit, and in a very precarious, careful way.
Yeah. Would you... Now that it's done and you're in the stage of your life where you are, would you change it? Would you think that that's a significant time in your life that you've learned a lot from it and grown as a person from?
Yeah, hell yeah, I would not fucking change it.
Yeah, so it is part of you now and it's part of your journey.
Yeah. I mean, it's informed my values and morals a lot, to the point of that sort of intersecting with my art practice, and I feel like my art always had some sort of... there was always a story and some personal narrative, but the works I made were for me. They weren't really for anyone else, unless I wanted to buy them. But they ultimately were what I wanted to do in some cathartic sort of sense of mark making and deranged thinking, Whereas now, my work has sort of started to, be a bit more thematic, surrounding drug use, which can start conversations, and
Mm-hmm.
I might post some confronting shit which I understand can trigger some people, but the countless messages that I've got from users and addicts, opening up and asking for advice, and I'm sharing them fucking support lines and shit. You just don't know what journey that sends them on, and I think it's really good just having those conversations. I've made, at the very least, I've made people feel comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good start. So I think that I would have taken my practice in that direction without prison.
Yeah, well, it's all part of the journey, I guess. And then, so now, when you've met some people that have been on that journey, and I'm guessing there's people in there that have been in and out of those sort of facilities their whole life, do they look at you and try and connect with you when they get out, because they're like, well, Ben's got himself on track, he's got a... You have your art. You always have had your art, but there must be people that have only really been involved in crime, or probably didn't have people in their lives to look up to that they could reach out to that weren't in that fucking career criminal scene?
Not really, because no one really knew I was an artist. I just went in as a trafficker, and that's what I was. Because I didn't share, that I made work. 'Cause, it becomes a commodity.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be drawing fucking dudes' fucking birthday cards for their daughter and shit. You know what I mean? Like being sued over for something, for a favour.
Yeah.
But it's not really. But like, talk to heaps of people who've been to prison, and have sort of really changed their life and sorted their shit out. Heaps of people, got big podcasts about prison and stuff. And so there's that. But yeah, not really. I guess. And I guess it's still sort of fresh. Like, the newspaper articles and shit that came out, like, on my day of bail, like, most of those people who would have seen those articles in prison would probably still be there.
Yeah.
The few that might be out, like, you know, it's a small chance they reach out.
And it's there's the numbers of the people that get out, that reoffend, or that end up back incarcerated is pretty high, isn't it? There's not a lot of people that get in
50%.
50%.
Within 2 years.
Within 2 years. So the fact that you got in and then you got out, I guess, is you're one of the lucky ones that didn't get caught in that cycle, in that systemic kind of in and out revolving door.
Well, it hasn't been 2 years yet, but yeah.
But knock on wood, you seem to be doing okay. But then I guess when you get out, do you have to do like you've got to connect with your parole officer? You've got to be seen to be doing the right thing. Obviously, do you have to do drug tests and all that sort of shit as well?
Yeah, so I'm still on order. So you do piss tests, and your officer makes sure that you're doing your community work, and going to your appointments, seeing your psychologist, and they're just sort of there for you.
So there seems to be a lot of support when you get out, but not so much when you're in.
There was a lot of support for me. Like, I had a really good officer. Had her for 8 months, and which is semi-rare. Like, you don't normally have an officer for that long. It normally switched up a bit. And she was amazing. And then I got switched to a different one. She was shit. And then I got switched to another one who's also now amazing. Yeah. I'm pretty lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I guess the next step is... Go, sorry.
For the most part, like, I think generally you get stuck with a shit corrections officer.
Yeah.
So the support's not there. Like,
but
I spoke to someone who'd done 4 years, and he come out, and he's now working with corrections, not for corrections, but with them. And he agrees with me, like, just people just get someone it's just like a rock up to work sort of thing.
It's a luck of the draw, though. Obviously,
it's a luck
with
of the draw.
Any job, and I guess with like a government job like that, you're going to get people that take pride in their work, and you're going to get people that just fucking tick the boxes and do the bare minimum.
Pretty much.
So then when you're out, which is not far from where we are now, you're trying to reconnect with the art community. Like, is that... Obviously, you've been through stuff, but like we said before, musicians and artists tend to have a bit of leeway with doing the perceived to be the wrong thing and get away with it. So have you been welcomed back into the art community, or do you feel a bit ostracised?
A bit of both. Probably feel more ostracised, but that could just be like bad self-esteem. But I've definitely just, from the events and anxiety and shit, I've sort of withdrawn myself from, going to openings and like being like heavily involved. I'm involved on Instagram and stuff, and I post stuff, but a lot of my engagement now is just people who like my work. And don't get me wrong, I've still got collectors, artists, curators, gallerists who have stood by me. Yeah.
You're not the first artist to go through something like that, you know what I mean? Like, there's lots of artists that have had tumultuous lives, and it's trouble aside from what they do for, artistically.
It'd be good to make a book about artists who've been in prison, actually, within Australia.
Well, there you go. That's your next project.
So as far as I know, there's only 2.
Really?
3. But there must be more.
There'd be more, yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. It's a good idea. Research that shit.
Yeah, well, there'd be heaps of people with stories, and maybe something was gonna happen. They ended up doing long sentences, and there'd be some cool artwork out there. And I'm sure the longer you're in for, the more they would let you have access to art supplies and actually paint and draw and stuff, I'd imagine.
Yeah. I mean, Julian Knight had a fucking PS3 in his cell.
Really?
Yeah.
There you go. Well, that's just who you know.
Oh, I have no idea. Like, it's not like he's respected or anything. But, yeah.
So, getting back into art again, it's a process I'm sure that, you've thought about, you've had time to think about. Is it something that's calculated that you're like, okay, well, I'm going to start drawing, I'm just going to start to figure out where I'm at, then maybe have a solo show, or like, is there a plan of attack there?
Yeah, I guess I sort of came out and was just like, went back to, so what I used to do was like gung-ho, like a fucking network and talk to people. And then had a solo show in New Zealand, which I worked my ass off for. After that, I didn't do anything. Like, it's been almost like a year and a half. I haven't done shit. I've only just sort of gotten back into like drawing in the last like month.
I've seen you, recently, yep.
But yeah, I had a big break. I did come out and fucking smash the show out, and it was successful. I think I felt like I had to do it. Not sure why yet, but did it, and then I was just like, I'm done for a while.
Okay.
I mean, just sort of getting back the motivation. I'm not painting yet, but starting to draw and like
baby steps.
Yeah. And I've got a good housemate who's creative, so he's working all the time. So.
And I see you've got your turntable set up from Instagram as well. You're playing some music as well.
Oh man, all the time. Can't not have music on.
Yeah. What are you listening to at the moment?
At the moment, man. At the moment, I listen to a lot of Swans, but I'm always listening to that band. I'm obsessed with them. I get some hip hop stuff. Like, I mean, I grew up with hip hop, and go through my phases, and I always go back to it. But have massive stints of it, and like most of my record collection is hip hop. But at the moment, I'm just listening to heaps of no wave shit and like post punk stuff from like the early '90s, and
cool.
Just sort of swapping little drawings for like little stacks of records and discovering new things.
I've got heaps of records, man. You have to come and check out my collection one day when you're down the peninsula. So with this is something that it's hard for me to, as a not artist, to get my head around. With your artwork, there is a lot of pop culture sort of references in some of the earlier stuff. Do you think that represent, like, I don't know, it seems like it's removed from where you are now. Is that why you're not drawing or painting anymore, because you want to try and open a new chapter?
It's not, like, I guess I am opening a new chapter anyway, but I guess I just sort of stopped because I was maybe overwhelmed with like the fucking stress of like, I guess a lot of media shit too, when like the dust hadn't settled, and trying to like rear my head again was like a bit much. And like, you go to an opening, have these fucking conversations with people, and like they ask you, not like a podcast where it's, they have like a good healthy conversation for a while. It's like a high buy thing, like, oh yeah, with prison, or what's prison like? Yeah. And it just gets a bit old.
And do some of the art people try and cash in on that as a bit of a fucking novelty? Like, hey, here's this artist, he's been to prison and he makes artwork, like trying to use that as like some sort of sales point?
But I don't think so. Not with me anyway.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I thought that I have a bad sort of interpretation of what art sort of, because obviously with those galleries, to use a drug reference, they're stepping on it. Like they are taking their big commission, you know what I mean? And they're trying to hype up a show whichever way they can generally.
Yeah, nah, like, I mean, the only show that I've done since all this shit was really just about my mental health.
Yeah. And
so we focus on that. We didn't focus on, like, I don't think we even talked about prison.
But you haven't had anyone reach out and try to use that, like to try and commercialize that as a success?
Nah. No. Not yet.
Not yet. Plenty of time.
See how much they offer me.
Plenty of time to cash in on that. So obviously with your drug history, and we're having a beer today, a lot of these different rehabs and programs believe that you should, if you had an issue with one substance, you should never touch any other substance. And obviously you don't agree with that sort of stance.
Yeah, nah.
Do you want to elaborate or no? You don't, which is no. It's just a lot of them, and for people I know that have been to rehab, say they might have gone there for ice. They come out and they're not allowed to drink because they say that you start to drink and then that's a gateway drug, all that sort of stuff. Which you can understand that to an extent, but maybe that's a tired theory. I don't know. What's your stance on it?
I guess it doesn't apply to everyone. In many cases, it's true, but in many cases that probably aren't talked about or people don't know about, it's not true. So I guess by not, acknowledging it sort of can reduce stigma, or at least maybe, bring up that conversation that, you don't want to encourage someone, but like a life, I mean, for people to reach out for help thinking that they can't, manage this shit anymore, they imagine that they're in this position and they have to fucking be sober. Not even thinking, can I just do a little bit?
Yeah.
And there's services out there that can help you just to, just take it a notch back and just see what happens. Yeah. And then if it's not working, then go further. Like if you just go black and white contrast, like I'm fucking heavy out all day, and then you go back to 0, it's going to be so much harder than going to like the middle and then being like, this is sort of working, or it's working, or it's not working, and then making the decision like which way you want to go.
Yeah, so with booze, it's socially acceptable. People can have a drink here and there. Do you think that other drugs should have that same sort of, this person can recreationally use this drug and they don't have an issue? Like I just mentioned, that a lot of the programs and what I can understand, they say you shouldn't touch it at all. But I guess then that drug is still somewhat controlling you. But if you just use it here and there, and that person has to have enough strength to not ruin their fucking life, is that the perfect world and the balance with drugs?
Probably.
Yeah. But we can't rely on everybody having that strength, especially if they've really hit sort of some low points.
Yeah. And that's why there needs to be more programs to help people who can't. But it's like, don't ruin the party for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, all the people who, make policies and lobby and like politicians who are against, like they're all having a bag of fucking coke on the weekend, just like, our fucking cousin or sister or fucking teacher or Uber driver or the person taking our groceries is fucking having a bag and having a good time and not fucking their week up.
Yeah.
You just hear about the stories where it fucks their life up.
Yeah.
So it's like, people can manage it. There needs to be a conversation around that. And like, if people knew that the AFP fucking let shipments of coke in just to get information on some other shit, people are going to be like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, where's, like, really, like, the bigger picture? Like, there's shit that's illegal, but then it gets let into the country and people get their hands on it. But you're not allowed to do it. It's sort of weird.
And what are your... Well, I think I know where you're going to go, but what are your stances on, like, firstly, decriminalisation of drugs and then legalisation of drugs?
I guess sort of... Like, decrim sort of normalises it. So it's like a slap on the wrist. So, you're not going to go to jail. Or like, if you get caught, like, multiple times with, like, more than 3 or 3.5 grams, like, you're not going to, like, trafficking charges. So it sort of makes it, like, it's almost, like, normal to, like, some people are like, oh, fuck it, I'll have a few drinks and drive home, I know it's wrong, but, like, I'm not going to get in, like, hectic trouble unless you've reoffended, like, fucking, how many times.
Yeah.
Whereas legalisation just reduces the stigma completely, and makes shit more accessible for people, makes them comfortable, like I've said, to reach out. People don't feel like they're doing the wrong thing. don't get me wrong, it's a fucking Pandora's box. Like, there's so many fucking kinks that will open up, like, that we just can't, foresee right now. Like, but to make it black and white, it's like, if it saves people's lives, let's give it a go. And if it doesn't work, we can change it back.
Do you ever think, though, that potentially the legalization will introduce people to substances they probably wouldn't have gone down that route, though?
Yeah, it would, but it also introduced them to the services to help them with it. I mean, if you look at the success rates in other countries, like, it sort of stands up to, like, the numbers of legalizing shit. It's like with the overdose prevention services, like, such a big hoo-ha about it in the city for a safe injecting room, but they pop up overseas in Europe all the time, and it's not in the papers, not anything. No one knows what the fuck they look like. No one gives a shit.
Yeah, I think that here it's definitely used as a media sort of scare thing. Like, if it was just there, sorry, and I know the one in the city, there's already been like a Salvation Army type thing there for years and years and years, where they're probably doing something similar, but just not on a legal fucking, there's definitely people there helping them, and it was also a bit of a hive of activity for people that were probably using that stuff. So then you brand it as a legal place, and then everyone gets their panties in a twist about it.
Yeah, and like, there's such an emphasis on injecting room, which they now call overdose prevention center,
which sounds better.
Well, it's like people make a fucking focus on, like, people go to shoot up. And it's like, yeah, but there's also health services that are offered to these people that we access that they can't. Like, there's tampons provided, there's pamphlets provided for things, there's other health services. Like, there's a range of things. It's not just fucking, like, shoot up and fucking hang out. And there's an argument, like, people make, like, when you go, it's like a hub for dealers and shit. I mean, everyone's a hub for dealers. Like, they're going to get it anyway. They're going to get it anyway, but if you make a legal spot, or a place where they can use safely, they might meet another dealer, sure. But they also might meet someone in the fucking 20-minute room after that they have the time to, like, decompress with and get a pamphlet and then leave, that is on the same journey as them, that is like, I want to fucking get off this shit.
Yeah.
They might meet someone that, inspires them to change their thinking. Like, you're not going to meet that person, like, in the flats. So it's like, the problem's always going to be there. You can't just put it's been proposed to be put at, near Queen Vic Market. Everyone rallied, like, all the businesses, like, fuck that. Then they proposed it for De Grave Street. All the businesses, like, no. Then they proposed it for Burke Street. And it's like,
no one wants it in their backyard.
Everyone makes a massive point, and as soon as it's shifted to Burke Street, the people at the Graves, people near Queen Vic, do they say anything? No, they're like, it's not a problem anymore. It's 2 blocks away.
Yeah.
But it's still the city. They make all this hoo-ha about it, but then all of a sudden they shut the fuck up. So.
Yeah, I don't know what the right answer is. No one wants it in their backyard. I think the location is always going to be something that people are going to argue about till forever, Like, that's just how it is. I think it has to be somewhere in the city because that's where everyone meets, obviously.
Well, I can't remember the last time someone complained about the one in Richmond.
People in Richmond, because it's right next to the school, and people complain about that, but knowing that area, that was the mecca of where the drugs were happening. So, like, if you were going to put it anywhere else, that would be stupid. Like, you put it where the problem is.
Yeah. And they've saved so many lives. Like, it's the other thing, like, people lobby against this shit, and it's like, if you had a child that became a heroin addict, you'd be a fucking alien or a fucking monster to not change your way of thinking and be like, why has my, someone I have unconditional love for got to this point, and how can I help them? It's just like, yeah.
So do you believe that all drugs across the board, anything, should be decriminalised or potentially legalised.
Yeah.
All of them. So, in this...
It's a tricky one because there's some that I'm like...
But in your utopia where this works, so what people go to the GP and they say, yep, I want to try this drug. They get a prescription, you go to the chemist, they give it to you, they say, but you've got to go and use it at the controlled environment. Is that how it works? It's a strange one.
I guess. I mean, it's something it's not really totally worked out. But, you know, obviously there'd be sort of certain amounts of certain drugs as well. Like, you know, if you're going to get a script for fucking coke, it could be different to getting a script for heroin. And it's controlled that way. But giving that person the opportunity to experience that, I agree, it might give them the opportunity to then, like, source it elsewhere. But the fact that it is legal, it should reduce the crime and like the drug trade. And like another reason like that people don't think about is, you know, legalizing shit. We'll talk about like coke specifically. Like when you know, everyone's happy to have a fucking bag at some shit house party in Brunswick, but like when you go back to where it's made and like all the shit that's happening in those countries, if it was legalized and the actual war on drugs that's happening, which is started in like I think the 1940s by America, it's like you could have like sanitized factories with regulated drugs with proper wages. The economy would change, crime would be reduced, violence would be reduced, poverty would be reduced, and then down that chain, like everything's a bit safer.
Yeah.
You know, people are happy to fucking be vegan and dye their hair blue, but they'll fucking rack some coke because they don't think about the fucking kid, you know, in fucking Peru with the fucking coat hanger pulling the shit out of a box, getting slapped around because he fucked it up.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, it's a conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah, it's a little bit hypocritical.
Yeah.
The decriminalisation thing I can understand. The legalisation thing is something I think is hard to comprehend. I think because we are so far away from that.
Yeah.
You know, the only legalised drugs we really have are, you know, tobacco and booze and coffee maybe. Like there's nothing. So we're so far away from that sort of thing. It seems unfathomable for me to even think of that sort of happening. Not to say that it wouldn't potentially work, but it's a long way off.
For sure. It's definitely a long way off, but it's always going to be a long way off unless, like, you know, we have these conversations.
Yeah.
I mean, decrim would be a start. You know, I've had conversations with friends, like, having coke and shit and, like, talking about being progressive and, like, having good foundations for your friendships and relationships and, like, just real healthy conversation, like, around a fucking coffee table when everyone goes home. At the same time, there's people, you know, getting smashed on beer, like beating their wives and wrapping their fucking cars around poles. It's like
I was thinking about it the other day. If booze was a new thing that we wanted to decriminalise and have shops to sell booze, people would be up in arms. Like if that was a new product or a product that was illegal, prohibition was in full effect, and then they're like, we're going to have an alcohol shop everywhere and people are going to be allowed to get as drunk as they want. People would be up in arms because that probably is the worst drug when you use it the wrong way.
Yeah. I mean, they tried to do it, right? With the prohibition.
Yeah, it didn't
work.
And then they tried to stop people from drinking after 6 o'clock.
True.
That didn't work. And then if they used to have, you couldn't
That's
drink
when
on
you
Sunday.
want to drink.
Yeah. That's the best time. That's happy hour. And I've got to ask though, like, I've got some tattoos and a lot of people do it. Tattoos are very normal now, but you've got some on your face, which isn't abnormal now. A lot of people do have them. Do you feel that people are looking at you differently, or obviously it's a choice that everyone makes when they get ink, that they choose that sort of thing? Do you think that people are looking at you a bit differently now?
Yeah, not everyone, but yeah.
Yeah.
Normally people that I don't interact with, generally,
Yeah.
You might feel the stare or see them looking at you. Sometimes you get dumbass questions and shit, but definitely changes like the way people perceive you. Like, yeah, I mean, you know, I might start a conversation with someone, like you can just sense the the energy of like, and as soon as like I start talking and like we get comfortable, it's like, you know, it's all good. But yeah, it changes it, but nothing tangible for me, like to my detriment so far. I mean, like if you have a partner and you're going to meet their father or like, you know, their friends and like they sort of, you know your history or whatever, like it could be alarming. That's probably the biggest thing for me, which sort of, it sort of, you know, upsets me a little bit, but you know, it's a place in time, and it was a statement that I made that I was, you know, I still sort of say, or I stay true to, and still believe in. But yeah, I mean, you get perceived differently, but I mean, at the same time, it was almost like, apart from me being like, you know what, I'm getting this because like this is fucking, you know, this is what I represent, but it was almost like, well, I'm gonna fucking, I just wanted to keep doing art, and I don't want to have a fucking normal job, which was, you know, pretty much almost an option post prison, was just to get a fucking factory job again.
And that is, for a lot of people getting out, obviously you've got the art background, which you can get back into, but a lot of people wouldn't have those options.
Yeah.
And I guess the factory job is the only sort of thing that people could get into.
Yeah. Even it's sort of like hard, but...
Yeah.
But yeah, at the same time for me, it was just like, you know what, like I'm just going to do this as well as like a thing to be like, totally alienate myself from normal jobs.
Yeah.
To force my hand to like keep following what I'm interested in, and force my hand to work harder at, you know, my practice, and like, you know, keep working on my art.
Yeah, man, I think that wasn't the answer I was expecting, but yeah, man, that's sick. So with your art, and not only you making and creating your own art, you got any, you know, bigger dreams of curating shows or doing any other sort of art related projects that might be within the art space? There's a fucking fly in here that aren't you know, the sort of painting and drawing and fine art type stuff.
You've got a couple of things that are going on. There's one thing that that you might be referring to, but I've since decided not to talk about it because
fair enough.
I feel like it'll bring some heat. So I just, in 3 years, just want to pop out and be like, oh, here's this project I've been working on.
Yeah, sick.
So, everyone can wait for that.
We'll steer away from that one, man.
But, there's a bunch of stuff. I want to start a podcast. I've really been taking my time with it. I feel like it's a commitment, as you would know. Like, I don't want to do it lightly. I want to make sure...
I'm big about doing them in person. And I feel like you'd be that same sort of guy.
Yeah.
You'd want to sit there with them. The Skype stuff, that's cool for people to do that, but I'm not that sort of...
Yeah, no. It could be in person.
I feel like it, yeah.
And, so, I've had this idea for a long time, but, I'll get there.
Yeah.
It'll happen. I'm just, chipping away. It's always in the back of my head. And just, working on some, like, little zines and shit with some friends, and you've given me an idea for a fucking book already, so yeah,
keep plugging away at those sort of things, man. Yeah. And what about some like solo shows, or even like entering some stuff in some sort of exhibitions or anything like that coming up?
I don't think I'll enter anything for a while. Just sort of making some work, posting it slowly. Exhibition-wise, I've got nothing planned. I've talked with some people about certain things, and something might do something, but it's really, I think I just need to focus on just like making some fucking work.
Yeah.
Get back into that rhythm and that groove of like pumping out some stuff, and just not like taking the first opportunity. Just make sure like everything is like Mickey Mouse.
Doing that like with a gallery, or would you want to do your whole sort of exhibition thing yourself? And
either or. When time's right, like I'm not really phased about the whole gallery system anymore within Australia. It's I know most of my collectors anyway.
So you could cut out the middleman.
Yeah.
So if you had a show, Ben Aitken show 2024. You could find a fucking warehouse, put it on yourself, do all that stuff, and go direct to the source.
Yeah.
Fuck, why would you want to have a middleman then?
I mean, originally you wanted one, or I wanted one for the accolade or the respect of the name of the gallery.
Oh, so that guy. Yeah, okay. There you go.
You know, and the context your work is shown in within the stable of, you know, these other big names, you know, build your profile. But now I'm at the point where it's just like, just do it yourself. Yeah. But having said that, like, you know, if a good gallery want to do a show, I'm happy for the 40% commission. Like,
which is steep though, isn't it? 40%. Yeah.
I mean, if they do the job and they get people buying your work, if they sell work and I don't know where the fuck it went.
Yeah.
If the price that it sells for, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah. Be a while off doing that, you think?
I mean, yeah, it depends who comes knocking, but yeah, probably.
Yeah. Baby steps, man. Well, Benny, I've covered a lot of stuff that I want to talk about. If there's anything that you want to talk about.
Nah, man.
I appreciate you being so candid and open, and you seem like a good dude who, you know, I think some big things. This is just a start of your artistic journey, I feel like, man.
Yeah. No, it's like, you know, I touch on, like, you know, how I feel like my work has found a purpose, like intersecting, like, what I'm passionate about and what I talk about to create conversations. You know, I never... Not to say that I feel like my work lacked any sort of passion or context or story or anything, but I definitely feel like now, like, you know, slowly, it's yeah, I feel like it has a tangible purpose for me, as opposed to like being compelled to do it because I felt like I just felt compelled to do it and I didn't know why, but like I guess that's just being an artist, like you just got to create. Whereas now I'm like, well, now I understand the reason why.
Yeah. And what about your journey with drugs and obviously you're having booze at the moment, but is that something that you'll have an ongoing, I won't say issue, an ongoing relationship with?
I'm still on order, so no comment.
In the future, it's feasible. Yeah. So yeah, it's because booze is legal. I guess does that push people that get out of jail that have to do that stuff, that they're gonna have to, if they want to have fun, they have to go down that route.
Maybe. I guess there's still ways around it as well. Like, people still, if they really fucking want to use drugs, they're going to use drugs.
Yeah.
That's probably the problem, like, with addiction, like, and comes a part of that revolving door with prison. Like, people just end up being like, it's too hard, and they don't have access to the shit they need access to, and they just fucking give up because prison's so much easier. Like, you know, 3 meals and a fucking, you know, bed to sleep on.
So they go back.
I have to worry about fucking paying bills and doing all this shit and worry about addiction and, like, you know, everyone fucking alienating them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And are drugs available in prison if you know the right people, if you do the right thing? Yeah.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
So those people that have those addictions can get everything looked after and they can still get their dependent thing of choice.
Yeah, well, not as easy as...
Oh, because they need the money. Oh, this is something I've never asked about. Sorry, I just thought about this. Is backtracking a little bit. With the legalisation and decriminalisation, we did... Well, from my knowledge, methadone is something that isn't decriminalising it or anything, but they are offering that to people through a health service, and that's something that isn't really that talked about. Is that a step into legalisation or decriminalisation or anything like that?
I'd say so.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, like, yeah, you don't really talk about, like, methadone addicts or anything, like, you know, out here, but, like, in prison... It's a fucking... That and Bupe are fucking worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
And because it's, you know, not accessible by everyone, becomes a fucking... Creates a whole economy within...
That's a commodity.
Within, right? Like... Within prison, like, you know... So... That's another question that you raised for me too. Is like, what would drugs look like in prison if it was legalized? I've never even thought about that.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing.
That's a whole thing. That's hours of just fucking thinking about. But like there's plenty of places where I grew up and, you know, around here and everything, that there is, you know, they're methadone chemists
Yeah.
And you see people there, but that's something that like. There's no other drugs that I'm aware of that people say, all right, you want to get off that? Well, we'll give you this option to try and get off it. That's something that it has to be, I guess, a start, or it's just an unusual thing for an illegal drug.
Yeah, for sure. Even like ice, fucking some dexamphetamines or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
But it's an interesting one. Like that whole thing of trying to replace one drug with another drug sends. Is it like robbing Peter to pay Paul? Is it even a feasible way to get people on the right track?
I guess it makes your habit more manageable, which is ultimately not my sort of vision. You want to be able to like manage the substance itself, or just not fucking do it.
Yeah.
So you're replacing one thing with another and not dealing with like the root issues of why you're addicted to it.
Would you, as I know you can't speak for everybody, but would you say that a lot of people that would be taking that methadone stuff are still using drugs as well, or is that's just going to give them their fix? Is it actually fixing the problem, or is it just something that they'd usually be using on top of the rest of them?
Some people yes, some people no.
Yeah.
I know people that have successfully used it and tapered down and stopped.
Yeah, because that's the whole thing. You want to wean off it.
I know some people just stayed on it, and I know some people would just trade it for other shit.
Yeah.
So again, it comes down to that, like, you're still reducing it.
So having that in place is better than nothing.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's administered, or generally, or depends like what you're doing, but like they'll watch you take it, or they're giving you certain amounts. It's definitely reducing fucking overdoses.
Yeah,
for sure. Because
it's a given in a controlled manner that people can't take too much or whatever. Interesting, man. Well, we could talk about this stuff all day. Like I've got so many questions on how the whole legalization and decriminalization would work, and I think a lot of people do. And I want to talk to Jack Nagel, who you've spoken to before, about. He's got some crazy ideas of all that. Maybe we should try and get together with like a 3 or 4 of us and have a chat one day and try and fucking nut it out, fix the world's problems.
Yeah, get on
it. Get on it and talk about it. All right, thanks Ben for coming, man. You're a legend, and I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks, dude.
Thanks, brother.
Cheers.
3,000.